There you
All
are.
right. Hello, everyone. And we're about to welcome our live studio audience. Hello, everyone. Hi out there on Zoom. Hi on Facebook and YouTube. We're about to begin here, welcoming you to Piano Tech Radio Hour and introducing the program. This program is uh, one where we meet every Saturday, and we learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world. This might include manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and then of course piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our various crafts to help each other and to create an ever more musical world together. Now, Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. That's an online learning resource that brings you cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour for just $16 a month, get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, get all the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. You can join using the link bit.ly/join PTRH, bit.ly/join PTRH. So I always like to remind you, we have the podcast of the show, audio only. You can find that at pianotechradio.com. For written summaries and explanations of masterclasses in our vault, you can check out our blog at pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com and follow us on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the like. And make sure you get on our email list by going to the website and signing up there with just your name and email. You'll stay up to date on everything going on with Piano Tech Radio Hour and Piano Technicians Masterclasses. Now I'll spotlight myself and I'll spotlight our guest. And I will introduce Grant Kondo. So, Grant is a pianist and educator whose path reflects curiosity, adaptability, and a deep commitment to helping students discover their own voice at the instrument. From growing up in Honolulu and performing in countless recitals and ensembles, spending formative years in Japan through the JET program, and ultimately completing a master's in music education, his path has continuously returned to one central question: how can we teach music in a way that truly sticks? He teaches students of all ages and stays actively involved in professional music education communities. His work bridges artistry and creative thinking, encouraging musicians to connect with music as part of their human expression. Grant, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Thank you, Ethan, and hello to everyone out there. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
It's wonderful to have you here. Um, I'd love to start by just kind of starting at the beginning, which we often do. What was your first exposure to music and the instrument of the piano, and how did you come to find out this was going to be such a central part in your life?
Well, that's a great question, and it's always such a mystery because I don't have. Both of my parents are extremely loving and supporting parents, but they're not musicians in any sense. They don't read music. They never took formal lessons, and I think they just signed me up for group piano lessons at the age of 5 or 6, and you know, just to as many parents would these days, just see how it goes. And I guarantee you, they didn't think that it would go all the way like this. But yeah, that's where it started, and then I took group lessons for I don't know, probably a year. I don't remember. Maybe it was just a couple of months, and then I took private lessons at a music school, multi-teacher music school in the neighborhood, and started with a student teacher there, and then and I we read through a lot. We read through a lot of music. That was one thing that she promoted, and we had a lot of method books, and so I guess I got really good at sight reading. And then so I was able to just play a lot of music. And then by the time I was in high school, I switched to a teacher in Hawaii. Her name's Rosie Wang, and she taught me a lot of these, very the classical foundations, and I'm so grateful for that. And so that's where it all kind of started. Yeah.
And we can see for those that are watching here, there's piano in your background. Tell us a little bit about this instrument, since we have a lot of piano technicians in our audience. We're always curious about instruments in particular.
You mean which piano I have and that kind of that sort
What
of
kind of
thing?
piano? Yeah, what kind of piano do you have? What's the story? I feel like every piano is a story. It could be as simple as, well, I was looking for a piano and I went shopping around and I found this one as my favorite. It could be something a little bit more involved. But what's the story of this piano and how you got how you got a hold of
Well,
it?
uh, well, it's a great question because it was always my dream. Growing up, my parents were smart in that they just invested in a in a new quality upright from the very beginning, instead of saying, well, let me buy you something cheap and upgrade you if you keep at it.
Mm.
But that was it. And after a certain point, maybe I was in middle and high school, I could play things, and every Christmas and birthday, they would ask me, what would you like for your birthday or for Christmas? And when I was a kid, it was like video games and those kinds of things. And eventually it became like a grand piano. And then they would roll their eyes and be like, okay, maybe next year. Maybe next year. And then they eventually just stopped asking me because I wasn't going to get a grand piano, at least when I was in high school. Um, in fairness, they had to pay a lot for things like my education and lessons and things like that. So, anyway, it was my goal to get a grand piano, and so I saved up. As you know, I worked abroad in Japan, saved up some money, and then bought this. So this is a Boston GP 178. So it's like 510 model, and I did buy it new 2015, I think, from our local Steinway dealer, Chrissy Huang, who I know she's famous because she sells. I think she's like the number one sales of Steinway, like in the world,
Mm.
right here in the Bay Area.
Very cool. Yeah, and we were speaking before the program started. You're in the San Jose region, right? In
Yes,
California.
yes.
And what is that? And you can mention a couple of technicians you work with locally, right? And I know you mentioned Peter at Chronico, and he's known about this since the very beginning. I think he was on board with well, everything that we've been doing actually, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, so Peter, I first met Peter Chronicle. He was the technician. I was taking involved with some courses at some local community colleges, and he's the technician that works on those pianos, concert tunings, and those kinds of things. And anyway, I just contacted him, and we started to work on things, work on this instrument. When this instrument was new, I would have, as you would know, like literally stuck keys where you can't even play it. And I thought, I paid so much money for a new piano, and my electric piano is working better than that thing. But he, helped like calm and fix it and come, multiple times in that year. And he's great. We actually did a presentation a few years back called The Piano Explored, where we both talked about the instrument, both from a performer and educator standpoint, and also a technician standpoint. And so we got a camera, and he would show us different parts of the action and the soundboard and things like that. And it was great. He's very passionate about what he does, and he now teaches. I don't know if you know this, but he now teaches a
Mm,
technician training
mm,
course or program at the local community college. So how do you
wonderful.
know? How do you know him?
Oh, just from so at the very beginning when I started doing educational content back in 2017, around 2017, I was just putting the word out about these. This was before the pandemic. This was before streaming, and sort of learning and meeting digitally, it wasn't always preferred or even thought of as a great option. So, um, but I had reached out to the community to try to find what are our biggest problems. One of the biggest problems, and still is in the piano industry, is you have people who want to learn how to do something, but they can't really find the best resources to learn how. A mentor or a book or whatever it is, like they're just not cutting it. And then on the other end of it, you have people who know how to do things, but there's only one of them. And in order to do sort of mentorship, they had to travel around and, have little seminars and stuff like that. So we cut out the middleman and we created these um, lecture opportunities that were remote, but high quality, and also like the advanced topics. And so Peter, being someone who was advanced and always interested in learning, he said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to." Our first class course was on voicing. I think he was part of our very first course on voicing with this
Wow.
gentleman named Boaz Kirschenbaum, who lives in Martha's Vineyard near Boston, right? And yeah, how is he going to do a class with Boaz Kirschenbaum except, wait until he had a convention or some sort of a local meetup, except for, he wanted to participate in this class, and he's been supportive from the beginning. So that's really just how we got in touch, was through my initiatives in education there.
Wow. Well, that sounds like Peter. I guess I have to reach out to him. So, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. We'll shout him out in the email for this for the recapping the program.
perfect.
Um, yeah, so do you have other pianos, or is this your instrument? This is your acoustic. You got digital as well, or what do you keep with you?
Yeah, I have a, I guess you can't see it, but I have a digital, just like a,
Okay.
Casio Privia. Um, and, basically for all the things that digital pianos can provide that an acoustic cannot, things like MIDI input, headphones, things that I mean, yeah, or sometimes of a very weak second piano when needed, you know, for two piano things or just playing together with the students.
Um, so tell me how you kind of got more deeply into the education side of it. We talked about how you became a musician, you had your own experiences being educated, and you had some good instructors and teachers along the way. We talked about how passionate you were about it, and you got, the pianos that you wanted, the piano that you've finally got. At what point did you start to become passionate about sharing music with others and helping onboard them and help them grow as musicians?
Um, yeah, that's another great question. I think so. Through when I graduated from high school, was not a, I did not I was not a music major. I thought I was going to maybe like minor in music, and then of course I didn't do research and realized that the school that I went to, UCLA, doesn't even have music minors. It's a small department, and so. But anyway, I thought I was going to be a pharmacist, because that's what my mom did, and I thought, okay, I was going to be a pharmacist. That seems like a good job for me.
Responsible. That's responsible.
And it's stable and it's not going away, and it's a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of job. And but then I always did music. And I did a lot of any extracurricular things. I played in musicals. I performed in dramas.
By the way, what better medicine than music? I mean, come on.
Quote of the day.
What of the day? You can ease your mother's concerns. I'm delivering the best medicine there is to offer.
Yes, 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 totally. And so anyway, I just kept doing. I kept doing a lot of musical projects, and anyway, after I graduated from my undergrad, I went to work abroad in Japan, teaching English, as to Japanese students as a second language. And even there, I did a lot of musical things. I was the director of this musical thing. And I just always found myself coming back to it, and I kept playing a lot. And I thought, okay, well, the nice thing about piano teaching is you can just start from zero. And I started with 2 students. It was my now wife's co-workers' kids, and as the story goes, before you know it, you have 50 students, and the rest is history, as they say. But a big passion that drives me is, I had and I'm very grateful for it, but I had a traditional classical, training, as many do. But that's only half of the time. When I'm actually sitting at the piano, I might play classical music half of the time, what I'm supposed to practice. But I always found myself playing a lot of other things, whether it's pop or video game music, movie music, anime, like oldies, Beatles, like all of these things. And I thought, okay, well, surely there are a lot of teachers that just teach that. I just happen to have a teacher that teaches, primarily classical music. And then I've found out, oh, actually, no, it's still primarily classically based. I mean, that was actually the main reason I didn't want to be. I considered being a piano performance like a double major or something like that, but I never considered it because I knew I did not want to do a 100% classical program, or even a mostly classical program and like one for fun piece. And and then I thought, okay, well, maybe it's a generational thing, and maybe younger teachers will start to also incorporate these things, these other genres, creativity, and things like that. But I found that it's not as much as I thought it would be. So that I thought, okay, this is really driving me. Like I feel like I want to do this in service of the students that want to have a more expanded access to playing the music that they want to. My studio consists of pretty much solely transfer students, students who came from another teacher. Most of them, they didn't want to, they like classical music, but they didn't want to only play classical music. And a lot of adults. I have a lot of adult students. And so we play a wide variety of things.
Mm. Yeah, that's cool. And you have a studio, is in San Jose as well. I mean, just kind of like a home studio. How
Yeah,
do you end up running that?
home studio right here on my Boston.
Mm, wonderful. Well, good investment. Um, and you could write it off on your taxes, I guess. I guess if you have that, I don't know how that happened. If you thought of it at the time of purchase, but that's kind of nice as well.
Yes.
Um, with such a significant investment as pianos can be. Um, I know that you have your setup so that we can hear that you're playing as well. And I know you shared some things in advance. Would you like to share anything of your work right now, be it musical or would you like to share some of the written content, kind of go through it?
Sure. So as part of this, story, I thought, okay, I want to create a resource resources that can help people, whether they're self-learning or teachers, to be able to combine sort of the traditional foundations with creativity and musical different musical genres and variety. So I don't know if you have ever met Forrest Kinney, but he was famous for being the pianist for Bill Gates. Anytime Bill Gates had a party at his house, he would invite Forrest Kinney to play the piano. But Forrest, he was a very dedicated educator, and he was one of the only people I knew that really talked about creativity in a more general and holistic and like philosophical sense. Because there are a lot of times, many people talk about creativity are, specifically talking about jazz. And, Ethan, I know you have jazz foundations. And so a lot of people talk about it in the jazz sense. But which is obviously a very important core, but it's not the only way to be creative. So I take more of a holistic approach to it, and I do a lot of creative things. But jazz musicians certainly would not call it jazz, even though I am improvising. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And maybe you'll hear some of that. So basically, what I did is I wrote these books last year called "Skills for the Modern Pianist," and let's see if my tech works here. Yeah, so it kind of
Oh,
looks like
nice.
this. This is the cover, and it's in beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So basically, the way I describe it to people is if you had, let me go to the table of contents here. So if I died tomorrow, everything that I know in my brain that I think is practical for people to know, I put into this book. So it's two parts, kind of what I call the hard skills and
Here, just a little change of view. Maybe X out on the left and maybe do a zoom in.
oh, okay,
Maybe
there
double
we go.
what you're at. There you go. Awesome.
Okay, so part one is the sort of the hard skills, the music things, and so everything from accompanying styles to harmony, talking about add twos and Alberti bass and tritone substitutions and upper structures, and all of these things, both that include classical terms and jazz terms in one place. I don't discriminate and say, okay, now we're going to learn about classical stuff and now we're going to learn about jazz stuff. I just say, here is what a tritone substitution is, and you know, but I don't say this is like a jazz concept because it can certainly be used outside of jazz.
Hmm.
And the second part, a lot of lessons that we kind of know, but there's no, it's not always explicitly talked about in books. So things like, the art of listening, right? Especially you would understand better than me. Listening is so important to jazz. But what exactly, how do you get deeper into that? Or what does it feel like to play freely? Or, practice, efficient practice. One of my favorite books these days is one by Molly Gebrian, to practice, learn faster, perform better. I know she was a guest on this show not too long ago. And so anyway, I follow a lot of things. I see a lot of similar things. Music in the brain, performance, anxiety, and even things like gratitude and thinking about why we do what we do, in the first place. So I talk about I basically use like a lead sheet and model, and then I talk about different, so I'll take the same four measures. These are in the advanced book. This is canon in D, and just take the same four measures and play it in different styles. So this one is blocked chords, and then we might play it broken, and then adding the octave. Starts out very basic, and then we might go to other things. I talk about adding some color, some add two chords, sus chords, add sixth chords, seventh chords, and then later on I talk about even college level things, augmented sixth chords. And, stuff like this. It took me months to wrap around my head around what the heck is a Italian augmented sixth versus a German, and so I wanted to just try to explain it, in one very clear, concise way. And I talk about line cliches, which are very common in jazz, pop, modal borrowing, and so I took a lot of my training is in classical, but in college, when I did my master's, I took a lot of jazz courses. I did jazz arranging and wrote a score for big band And yeah, it was just, I wanted, there's so much great from both worlds, and I wanted to just put it all together. So what I'll do maybe is play, I'll play canon in D, and I'm going to completely, oh, here's negative harmony, which was kind of popularized these days by Jacob Collier. So I wanted to
Mm.
put that in here. But anyway, I'll play a little bit. I'm just going to improvise in canon in D,
Hmm.
just starting from very simple and going to some other things. So
Great.
hopefully this works. I'm gonna let's see. I'm gonna turn off my echo cancellation. So hopefully, just while I play, hopefully that'll
Yeah.
work. I realized I forgot to change. I didn't change my microphone. Hopefully that current turned
Oh,
out
it came
okay.
through okay.
Okay, great.
Could
So
change
yeah,
that echo
okay,
cancellation.
yep, it's back on.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was cool. And I hear exactly what you're talking about, right? I mean, anybody can improvise, really, and you can improvise in all sorts of different styles, and you can make your improvisation sound a little jazzy. You can make it, sound classical or, out of nowhere if you want. So I appreciate that aspect. I always enjoyed that too. Like that was one of my biggest draws when I was practicing piano. It was probably off the rails too much, right? My teacher would say, "Hey, what did you practice?" And it was mostly just me going off the rails and having fun with what was already there. Um, so tell me about this process of saying I'd like to put a book together and I'd like to share it and publish it. And I'm sure that probably felt ambitious. And it's, you know, at this point you go, okay, great. I published it. It's out there. But, it's certain it's there's more access to it these days. But tell me about that whole process, making that decision, dedicating time, staying committed, and getting to the point where you actually had a published, three published books.
Yeah, that's a well, okay. It all started with I briefly mentioned Forrest Kinney, and he was basically so I attend sort of piano teacher conferences regularly, and he was always the he did a lot of things. He always did multiple presentations, keynote speaker, master classes. He did all these things in this creative vein, and he was really in his prime, and then he got sick and passed away in 2019. And I was really devastated. I mean, I wasn't even. I had only met him, maybe like a dozen times or so, but just the impact that he had, and I just felt it needed to continue. He was really pushing. He was pushing the industry. I mean, he was keynote. He was a keynote. I mean, for so many things. Obviously, people liked him and his philosophy. But it's hard. It's hard to make change. And even if you want to get into creative things and improvising or becoming, let's say, a piano technician, it's hard to just say, I'm just going to do it. There's a lot of time and resources you have to dedicate. So I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna try to continue this. And also, there were certain things about the way that he wrote a lot of books, and he championed what he calls the four arts of music, and improv like four creative arts. So improvisation, arranging, composition, and interpreting. Interpreting being what classical musicians do when you interpret a score, a fully notated score, Chopin or Beethoven or whatever it might be. And you could buy separate books for improv and separate books for arranging I mean, to buy his library, you'd have to buy like 40 or 50 books. And I thought, well, let me try to make it a little bit more accessible and condensed. So I took his philosophy and put in, of course, my own sort of things. And I thought, even if nobody buys the book, at least it's like for my I can use it and for personal things and for my studio. And one thing that I was also very passionate about is a lot of people think about creativity as this like for fun thing or supplemental, and so okay, if you can improvise on all black keys, then that's great. Now you did your creativity thing. Now let's go back to playing Chopin or playing Schumann or whatever it might be. And so, but for me, I'm very passionate about getting people into the advanced parts too. I mean, you know, I mean, jazz musicians know. Like, imagine trying to play jazz with just seventh chords, or triads. I mean, there's so much more. There's so much more that I think people should know. And modes, and I mean, there's so many great things out there. So
Yeah, I mean, you're actually making me think of, as a jazz musician, these days I'm not practicing for hours and hours a day like I used to, and I've got a lot of things on my plate. But one of the things that I really enjoy is just taking any t tune at all and just kind of unpacking it and just sitting and putting it in different keys and trying it in different rhythms and jazz improvising it. I find that especially fun is just taking a tune and jazz improvising on it, right? Or getting like a little rhythmic template on it where I can play some kind of a bass groove in my left hand and sort of fool around in the right hand. And I'm sure you probably use this as a technique, but I find particularly a really fun thing to do is just like a basic practice, which not anyone can do necessarily, but once you develop the basic skill, you can get better and better at it, is just taking a piece into different keys and then seeing what improvisational ideas come from those different keys, right? It's just such a fun because this things fits under your fingers differently, and um, sound differently in different ranges. And you can do it with a classical piece. A lot of people, I feel like that is so rare, right? People learn a classical piece in the key that it's in. That's it. And, that's how you learn it. Putting it into different keys, so fascinating.
Yes, and improvising around. I mean, Ethan, you basically said if every student could just do what you literally just described, we would be in a very different place. Yes, I mean that's just, and like you said, it's the great thing about it too is you can do that with much less practice, right? If I were going to perform some classical piece, I'd have to practice probably 10 times as much as if I were going to just improvise off of a certain tune.
Mm.
Because, I mean, that is the why my respect for the classical tradition is just the amount of effort. You cannot wing it. You cannot wing it. But being able to improvise around it really requires more deeper understanding of the structure, the harmonies, and everything. I mean, that So,
Tell me more about this sort of uh, community aspect, right? Because it sounds to me like you got really interested in the music teachers, conferences, and maybe others, and got inspired by other people. Um, I guess question I'm having is there's a few questions you could answer any and all of them. One, is there other things going on in your community just there in the San Jose area? You're not that far from San Francisco. Um, Also, like, was there were there moments in your process where this community aspect opened up? Because I know, like, I've had my personal journey, right, in different places where it's like, oh, this is just something I do on my own, and then all of a sudden it's, oh yeah, there's others that I can, there's conferences, there's communities online, it's just kind of making friends. But it sounds like that's been a part of your journey, and I'd love to just kind of hear different access points locally, globally, and the timeline.
yeah, I think, whew, how shall I? Well, I think, in all this talk about AI, for example, I actually am optimistic about music's presence because, human expression being human is something that AI cannot do by definition. So, one event we have here in San Francisco is called Flower Piano. And I'd love, if you know of any similar events around the country, around the world, I'd love to know. But basically, they take there's this garden called the San Francisco Botanical Gardens in the Golden Gate Park, and every fall, for about 3 weeks, they take 12 pretty good acoustic pianos and they just put it outdoors throughout the park, and people. There are official performances, but the main idea is for just anybody who plays the piano to just play in a setting for each other and in a setting that you can't do at home. And it's just, I mean, to experience it is really great, but also from an educator standpoint, it's very interesting to hear what kind of music you hear and the types of people. So, like, sometimes, one of the first people I met, they were playing some crazy maybe it's a Bach partita or something, and he brought his text, and he was ready to play his one piece. Then he did it, and we applauded. And then you get some other people who they're like, they have nothing in their hand, and they just start playing, and then they keep playing to the point where we want to go to the next person. Like, they can just keep playing and playing and playing. I mean, you know what that feels like. And I thought, and anyway, I thought at that point I had been teaching for a while, and I thought, okay, 90% of these people, 90% of students are learning classical music. So 90% of the people at this event are going to be making classical music. But I was very wrong. It was very diverse, very, very, very diverse. And so, and I like to be part of in the know. I'm very active in teacher communities, and anytime there's new materials that come out, I always try to explore them. Um, I am also, speaking of communities, I'm also starting an online community. I'm very inspired by what you do here, and starting as what started out as something very specifically for piano technicians has really grown into this wider community for piano. And that's something that I want to do as well. But in my case, it would be starting with this core of classical music and training, but expanding it to include whatever people want to play. Whether it's pop or anime or oldies, jazz, everything. So, and through online. But I guess I know people always talk about the downsides of online, which is obvious, but the upside is, there's fewer people who do this, and you can grab more people, from different places together. Like I've searched very long and far for a pianist that would call themselves like both a classical and a jazz pianist. There are many people who say they can do both, but they would still
Mhm.
say, well, but I'm primarily a, either classical or jazz pianist.
Mm.
And so through all my search, I found one. His name's Louis Heeman, and he's in Louisville. But anyway, so just to really kind of get people, and there's a lot of excitement, I think, around this notion of what I call the modern pianist. I made a little list here this morning of the like famous musicians that kind of fall into this vein. Probably one of the most obvious is Jacob Collier.
Mm.
He can do everything. He knows the standard traditional music theory, but the way he does it with the things, and he can improvise and sing and play every instrument. But also people like Gabriela Montero, John Baptiste, Hayato Sumino, Nare Sol, Leve, Keith Jarrett, Wynton Marsalis, Hiromi, Tigran Hamasyan, and they're all kind of course it's to what extent varies, but they're all kind of they're not just in a classical or a jazz lane, and so anyway, I think that's kind of what I'm trying to build. Yeah,
Mm.
it's
Yeah. I thought first person I thought of was Keith Jarrett. Yeah. And so it makes sense that he's on your list. Could see that I have a little animal sneaking around in the background here. It's my 8-year-old. He doesn't think that we could see him. Um, almost. He almost stayed out of the frame.
fun time.
Uh, so yeah, that's it's interesting to highlight. And you're right. There are some people who are kind of doing a good job of kind of pulling that together. And it is a space that is ripe for development. I do notice there's kind of like what was this? I forget. We had a guy on the show a couple times actually, and he had a Instagram channel. And it was a classical based thing, and I think he had a classical based thing and a piano based thing. And on the one hand, it was kind of cool to see. You realize how alive classical music and classical fandom is when you see these sort of social media. Oh, wow, there's so many people who are interested in kind of watching a little clip about, Beethoven's Fifth or whatever. Um, but but I think you're right. There's not so much of just saying like here's sort of a community for people who go like I like, how this all comes together, right? I like the kind of jazz and classical pop mix. Um, and yeah, so more power to you, and it gives me something interesting to think about. But I would love to I would love to hear. He's making it. He's he's ducking at the wrong moment. He doesn't realize where the scream ends and begins. Uh, um,
That's right. That's it's organic. I like to call it organic. I use the word organic. We're just living life. I mean, it's not like he's distracting. I mean, he's not like he's coming on the camera and yeah. I have two
oh,
young kids too, so I understand.
there he
Mine are
goes right
6 and
there.
4.
It's usually not in the frame at all. Um, all right. Well, we do have to wrap up here pretty soon. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to highlight or kind of places to send people, words of wisdom? Where would you go with that prompt?
Uh, well, I guess maybe to tie things together, I wanted to bring back in sort of the technician world and kind of what that is also included in kind of what I'm trying to do. I have in my book I also talk about extended techniques and really understanding the instrument, and I talk about pedaling and why we call it like the soundboard, the soul of the piano sometimes, and also you know and overtones, a lot of things that I wish I knew. And so I guess, but I wanted to also, I guess, I wanted to ask you a question that I
Hmm.
often, as a teacher, have a very hard time giving a good answer to. And I thought you might be a perfect person to ask.
Mhm.
In sort of the differences between piano brands.
Hmm.
Like let's say the different. I mean, you know, the difference between let's say a Steinway and a Fazioli and a Shigeru Kawai and a Busendorfer, right? It's like, okay, they're all premium tier, expensive, relatively comparable in size and price, all handmade, but like really, and we can be very subjective, but I mean, I don't know, just from a technician, like a technical standpoint, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and yeah, like an
Um,
unbiased, since
yeah,
you're not a
yeah.
salesperson.
No, I'm not. And should I say this? I'm gonna say this just because I know other technicians may be thinking it and I've heard it before. Um, I actually have heard recently about Steinway, like a few stories of the instrument shows up and it's not ready, and you're like, what? And then they go, oh yeah, it's extra to get it ready, you know? Like, oh no, we don't have it. It's not ready when you get it. What you expected it to be ready. Yeah, no. Um, that's so you can customize it or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, interesting. Um, but I think it's a good question. I'm not necessarily an expert myself per se in the different brands, but having done this program and the unique perspective I have this, I've met people all over the world. I've met people who are, I'm friends with David Clavins, who creates his own custom pianos that hardly, resemble traditional instruments, but in some ways do very much so. Um, and I've met the folks from Steingraber, it's sort of like European, like legacy pianos, but then also they're integrating sort of, modern technologies as well. Um, and so there are differences in the piano brands. They're sort of intended to sound different. And we've had some lectures here, even on the program, about how, some a good demonstration of this is, hey, make my Yamaha sound like a Steinway, voice it so it sounds like a Steinway. And the technician that we had on okay, basically said, no, we don't do that. We make your Yamaha sound like a good Yamaha. We make your Steinway sound like a good Steinway because the manufacturer has some intention about what that instrument's supposed to sound like. And if you try to sort of override that, you're not going to be very successful, as opposed to just kind of amplifying what's supposed to be there. And then beyond that, though, you can customize instruments, but a lot of that's done in sort of the rebuilding setting or working with somebody who customizes for certain things about instruments, the action, the geometry, the trying some different hammers on the instrument, using carbon um, using carbon fiber or synthetic materials in the action or different parts of the piano. So you can definitely achieve a lot in the different of the sound, the difference in the feel, and most pianists will just kind of get to know the oh, I like the sound of this, of the Fazioli better than the Steinway, or that you play the different instruments and you kind of feel this is a little bit warmer, this is a little bit brighter. The Asian pianos are particularly known for being a little bit brighter in terms of the tone, and the sort of European and sort of German sort of style tends to be a little bit warmer and richer. Um, those are my general commentary. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, and one thing that I, of course, have learned over the years by playing I've been wanting to, by trying all these different pianos, is it's even within the same brand. I mean, it can be widely different, and so, I've learned that, yeah, you want to, and I'm not just saying this, but yeah, you want to have a good relationship with a quality technician because they can really help to bring out really what you are looking for. So anyway, I wanted to know your thoughts because, yeah, you're going to say it how it is. And you have experience, working with all of these different brands. Do you have time? Could I ask you like a couple more, one more thing, or if we have to
Yeah,
go, we can.
sure. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
So that's like the difference, between premium brands, but also perhaps the difference between, the premium brand and the standard,
Mm,
like the difference between Steinway and My Boston, or the
mm,
difference between Shigeru Kawaii and a regular Kawaii,
mm.
etc. I mean,
Meaning
for
like
me,
what makes why the higher price point, for example, or
yeah, like the only obvious difference is handmade versus machine,
mm,
factory built. But
hmm.
to me, that's not. There's much more. So I would love for you to enlighten
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, briefly. So as with anything that is pricier, um, the maker of it can afford to use higher quality materials and um, pay attention to more details. I would say that's a lot of what goes on. And I've said this lots of times, but I think it's worth saying again, and I apply this a lot. One thing that I've learned from this program and other, podcasts that I've done, media I've done, where I get to meet lots of people, is the people who are at the high end of what they do. People at the high end of anything pay more attention to details. And they pay more attention to details that you actually may not even think matter. It's kind of like where the sommelier goes, do you do the notes of there's a little bit of tobacco in there and parsley or whatever, and you're like, what? No, 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 this is BS, right? Oftentimes, no matter what domain you are, when you're at the high end, some of that stuff that seems like BS, either I don't know, I can't always tell, but the people they're always paying attention to it, whether it's BS or not, they're going to talk about these little things and they're going to seem to matter. So on a on a high-end grand piano, for example, one thing that I might hear people talk about, which you may never even thought about, right? But until you hear somebody talk about it. What kind of wool do you use to create the felt of that hammer? How is it felted together? Um, and what's the process of taking the felt and putting it on the hammer, and what are the different layers of the felt from the exterior to the interior, and how are they contributing to the voice and the tone of the instrument? How level are the strings, as the hammer hits them, and so on and so forth. So basically what happens at the higher end, what you're investing in is the materials that those who know or claim to know the important details that they're choosing those materials and choosing to pay attention to the fine details of that particular aspect. And you're paying for the materials themselves that they're sourced that are supposedly the best. They don't always have to be expensive, but they can be. And then also the time and energy, the expertise of, the person or the team of people that are advising on what's important. Um, so that's generally what I would say tend to be the differences between these things. And then just as a consumer, you just kind of notice the difference. You don't, it's a lot of it is inexplicable, but you can kind of tell. And some people would say they can't tell because they're not so refined. It sounds the same to me. But again, the musician that plays more, has more exposure to nuanced music, has practiced a lot, knows, how to play this trill exactly how it's supposed to be. Those are the people that are going to they're going to notice the difference and appreciate the difference. I will add one more thing that I have found that great technicians can do, though, is they can take the instrument that you play and you go, man, it can only get so good because, I spent $500 on this thing or like 5,000 or whatever. A good technician can come in and they can come do some things to your instrument, adjust the action, maybe adjust the voicing a little bit, where you can sit down and go, well, you know what? I didn't think this piano could do that. Thank you very much. So I will add that, it's some instruments have more in them than you might think. And some of them don't. So,
Well, you're
okay.
preaching to the choir. Yes, I certainly believe that.
Yeah. Great questions. Maybe we'll have you back on as a interviewer. You got some good
I,
questions.
I would love to. Yeah. So,
Yeah, we should wrap up soon though. It was great to have you here. Make sure people check out the book and mention the title again and how people can access it.
oh yes, so it's called Skills for the Modern Pianist, beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. It's available on Amazon, and my new community page, where you can also read about me and the community and the books, is called lifeoffthepage.com. Lifeoffthepage.com.
All right, wonderful. Well, we have reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour, and want to thank Grant Kondo as well as our live audience of dedicated community members that have joined us today. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. Now, this is cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. If you signed up for this session individually, you could make your life more convenient. You could subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, just $16 a month. You get recording of today in our member area, as well as automatic registration in each week's new session. You can sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Of course, remember the podcast, the blog at Substack, the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the email list, and you can sign up there at our website, just your name and email, and keep up to date on everything going on. And we'll say goodbye for now. Grant, you'll jump back on after we cut, and we'll do a quick wrap up. Thank you, everyone. Happy St. Patrick's time. Don't go too far over the edge with your celebrations, but enjoy.